In early January 2020, the World Health Organization became aware of a new strain of the SARS coronavirus that emerged in association with a market in Wuhan, China. At first, only a few dozen people were infected, but by mid-January, the new strain of the SARS coronavirus had spread to Thailand, Japan, and the Korean Republic. On January 20th of that year, the first cases of COVID were confirmed in the US. Europe quickly followed, with the first cases being detected in France on January 24th. Australia's first cases were documented a day later. Africa's first cases were documented in Egypt on February 14th, and South America's first documented cases emerged in Brazil on February 26th. On March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 to be a global health pandemic. And by the end of April 2020, with the exception of a few small, remote island nations, COVID had reached almost every country on planet Earth. By the end of 2020, COVID was responsible for more than 1.5 million deaths worldwide. And by the end of 2021, that number had reached more than 5 million. In early 2021, a newly developed COVID-19 vaccine started to become available. And as it became more and more widely applied, the rates of adverse COVID outcomes started to slow throughout 2021. As of the recording of this video, more than 5.5 billion people worldwide have received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. That's almost 70% of the world's population. In this video series, we'll take a look at virus biology in relation to COVID-19. We'll look at how viruses replicate and how they spread. We'll examine how to best kill a virus, and we'll unpack how immunity to viruses works, including both infection-based and vaccine-based protection. Before we get to COVID-19, we're going to start this video series by taking a look at basic virus structure and virus biology. So, what exactly is a virus? Well, if we start with the absolute basics, the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines a virus as any of a large group of submicroscopic infectious agents that are usually regarded as non-living complex molecules that typically contain a protein coat surrounding an RNA or a DNA core. They're capable of growth and multiplication only in living cells, and they cause various diseases in humans, animals, and plants. All right, well, let's unpack this a little bit. First, a virus is submicroscopic. That just means that it's really, really tiny, so small, in fact, that you typically can't see it using a standard light microscope. You need a specialized type of equipment called an electron microscope. Or to put it into a different context, something like the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 is just 1/20th the size of a single E. coli bacterium. And the E. coli bacterium is 1/500th of a millimeter long. All right, second, viruses are non-living. The reason why viruses are considered to be non-living is because they don't actually have their own cells or cellular machinery like living organisms do. Now, they do contain genetic material, either DNA or RNA, but they're not capable of replicating on their own. They're only capable of replicating by infecting the cells of living organisms, and then they hijack the cellular machinery of those living cells to facilitate replication. Third, and finally, they have a protein coat surrounding a DNA or an RNA core. All right, let's see how this looks in a few different virus types. I'll go through 3 specific types. I'll look at the bacteria virus, the plant virus, and then the animal or the human virus. Okay, bacteria viruses. They're also called bacteriophages. Bacteriophages infect bacteria and use the bacteria's cellular machinery to replicate. Once new viral capsids are formed within a bacterium, they break out of the bacterial cell so that they can then go on to infect new bacteria. Now remember, there are 2 key features of the virus structure. There's a protein coat and then a DNA or an RNA core. Here is what a bacteriophage can look like. The DNA or the RNA is held inside this protein capsule at the top of the structure. The other parts of the virus, the neck, the tail fibers, and the base plate, those are all made of protein. A bacteriophage infects a bacterium by essentially landing on it and then injecting its viral genetic material directly inside. We'll get more into precisely how viruses infect cells and replicate in a subsequent video in this series, so I won't really go into detail here. Let's move on to plant viruses. All right, what do plant viruses look like? Here's one example here. This is a picture of the tobacco mosaic virus, and it looks very different from the bacteriophage. Plant viruses are often rod-shaped with an outer protein coat surrounding a genetic core. In the case of the tobacco mosaic virus, it's an RNA core. That's right, no DNA. The core of a lot of viruses, like our friend the tobacco mosaic virus here, is written in the language of RNA, not DNA. Okay, how do plant viruses spread? Well, usually there's an insect intermediary that gets infected by feeding on a plant that has a virus, and the insect vector then carries the virus on to another plant as it feeds from one plant to the next. Last but not least, let's take a look at animal viruses. Viruses that infect humans fall into this category. And by now you've definitely heard of the coronavirus. You've probably also heard of a few other viruses like influenza, that's the virus that causes the flu, or maybe rhinovirus, which is one of the viruses that can cause the common cold. You may also have heard of viruses like the rotavirus or the norovirus, or the human immunodeficiency virus, also known as HIV, or something like Ebola, or viral meningitis, or the human papillomavirus, or chickenpox, or hepatitis, or measles, mumps, rubella, polio, rabies, RSV, shingles, herpes, Zika. The list goes on and on. In fact, we've identified hundreds of viruses that are capable of infecting humans. So what I'll show you here is just one particular way that a human virus can look. And for this, we'll turn to one of our most recent nemeses, the coronavirus. By now, everyone has probably seen this image here associated with coronavirus. So what are we looking at here? This looks remarkably different from the plant virus and the bacteria virus that I showed you earlier. Well, if I show you a simpler version of an animal or human virus, it could look something like this. Now, here, things start to get a little clearer. The hexagon shape here is the protein coat that holds the genetic material, which can be DNA or RNA, depending on the virus. But what are these knobby things? Well, the knobs are actually proteins that are embedded in the outer coating or the envelope of the virus. What's a virus envelope? Well, the envelope is actually a regular cellular type of membrane that the virus got when it replicated inside the animal or human host. These knobby proteins play a role in cell recognition, and they help the virus attach to a host cell so that it can then insert its genetic material inside. Throughout this video series, we'll take a deeper dive into virus biology, predominantly focusing on the coronavirus that's responsible for COVID-19. We'll talk about the virus reproduction cycle, virus genetics, and how virus evolution gives rise to different viral strains. Finally, we'll take a look at how to eradicate viruses, for example, from surfaces, using things like cleaning agents and detergents. And then, of course, we'll look at how the human immune response deals with viruses, both with and without the aid of vaccines. So be sure to check out the other videos in this series. And in the meantime, stay healthy. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.